My name is Ingrid Holt, and I was 34 years old the morning my mother took herself apart in a hotel lobby. It was 9:14 on a Saturday in June, and I was carrying two grocery store buckets of flowers across the marble at the Arbor Hotel in downtown Dayton. My mom came off the elevator in a navy suit with her hair already set. She looked at the buckets. Then she looked at me, in jeans, with floral tape stuck to my knuckles. There were 9 people in that lobby. One of them was our videographer, 20 steps away, holding a camera at his hip with the red light on, shooting the atrium for B-roll exactly like our contract said he would. My mother never saw him. I did. What she said took less than a minute. What it did to her over the next 6 days is the part I still cannot explain to anybody in my family. I never posted it. I want that on the record before we go one sentence further. I never had to. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the stories families keep folded in the back of the closet. The ones about money, about pride, and about what it costs to keep the front of the house looking nice. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. The flowers cost $61. I want to be precise about that, because the number matters later. In March, I had a quote from a florist on 3rd Street for $2,150, and in April, I called and canceled it, because Wes and I were paying for the wedding ourselves, and the roof on the duplex had other ideas. So at 6 that morning, I drove to the Kroger on Wayne Avenue and bought every bucket they had. Stock, alstroemeria, some eucalyptus, a lot of white pompons. I tied the stems with a spool of pale green ribbon out of my grandmother's sewing box. June Kessler died in 2014 and left almost nothing behind, and the ribbon was the part I wanted. I had the buckets in both hands when my mother crossed the lobby. She stopped a step closer than she needed to. She looked down into the water. "Where's the florist?" she said. It wasn't a question, the way she said it. I told her I'd canceled the florist in April and told her so in April. My mother's face did the thing it does in public, which is nothing at all, and then it stopped doing nothing. Her voice went up and it carried, because that atrium is 4 stories of glass and it carries everything. She said I had people flying in. She said she had people from the board coming. She said she had spent 11 years making sure nobody in this town could say a thing about her family, and I had walked into a hotel with a bucket from a grocery store. Then she leaned in, and she said it flat, like she was reading a fine off a form. "You're a cheap little embarrassment." And 20 steps behind her, at hip height, the red light was on. Here is what I want you to notice about myself, because I noticed it later and it took the ground out from under me. My first thought was not about my face. My first thought was Cody. I set the buckets down beside a planter and I walked straight at the camera. Cody Vaughn is 27 and he runs a 2-person outfit called Vaughn and Lark Films, and he had the good sense to lower the lens before I got there. I asked him to cut it. He said of course. He said he'd never have used it anyway. And then, because I have been doing this work for 9 years and I do not trust the word of a nice person on a stressful morning, I went up to room 412 and emailed him at 2 minutes past 10, in writing, asking him to remove all footage from the lobby between 9 and 9:30. He wrote back in 4 minutes. Absolutely. Consider it gone. I put the phone face down and went and did the other half of my job. My bridesmaids had heard something. Sound travels in a glass atrium. So I stood in the middle of that room with a hanger in my hand, and I said my mom was rattled about the drive-in and hadn't eaten, and that she gets sharp when her blood sugar drops. Everybody nodded. Somebody made toast. It was smooth, and it was fast, and it was very, very good work. I am a certified sign language interpreter. I have been one since 2017. The first rule of my profession is that you convey what is said, in full, without softening it and without adding anything that wasn't there. I had been breaking that rule for my mother since I was 9 years old, and she was the only person alive who had ever told me I was good at it. The wedding happened at 3:60 people in the Arbor's smaller ballroom, folding chairs with good covers on them. A string trio my friend Dana talked into it for gas money. Wes Danner is 37 and puts in commercial wiring for a living, and when he saw me come down that aisle he did not do anything cinematic. He just breathed out, all the way, like a man setting down something heavy. His mother died when he was 12, so he has a very short list of things he considers a real problem, and I am not on it. It was, and I mean this, a good wedding. My mother was magnificent. That is the part nobody believes when I tell it. She worked that room like a woman running for office, and she is, in her way. She refilled the coffee urn herself. She found the one aunt sitting alone and sat with her for a full 20 minutes. 3 separate people asked me who did my flowers, and I told them Kroger on Wayne, and every one of them laughed and said they'd never have guessed. Then, at the end of dinner, my mother stood up with a champagne flute and gave a toast. It was a lovely toast. She talked about the arbor and about Wes's people driving in from Fort Wayne and about the weather holding. She kept saying, "The bride. The bride looks beautiful. The bride has always been particular. Let's raise a glass to the bride. She never once said my daughter." Wes found my hand under the tablecloth and held onto it, and did not look at me, which is why I married him. And I did the job. Of course I did the job. My cousin Ash leaned over during the applause and said, half laughing, that Mom sure is formal tonight, and I said she gets nervous with a microphone, which is a lie so old in my mouth it has a groove worn in it. Then I got up and helped my mother carry the sheet cake back to the kitchen, and neither of us brought up 9:14 that morning, and we worked around each other at that counter as smoothly as two people who have been doing exactly this since 2001. The flowers were the only thing anybody remembered. The email came in at 4 minutes past 6 on Sunday morning, which is when studio delivery systems all over America wake up and do their work. Your full raw archive is ready. I read it twice before it landed. Our package was the basic one. Ceremony, toast, a highlight reel in 8 weeks. The full raw archive was an upgrade, $300, and my mother had bought it for us in February as her wedding gift, and had told 6 people at church that she bought it for us. Raw means raw. Every card, every clip, uncut, in the order it was shot. And the delivery link goes automatically to the guest distribution list, because that is the whole point of the upgrade, and the guest distribution list had every address I'd typed into a spreadsheet in January. 60 households. I sat on the edge of the bathtub in my robe and scrolled to the clip stamped 9:14. It was 40 seconds long. The audio was clean. You could hear the ice machine. I called Vaughn and Lark at 6:20 and got the voicemail greeting, because it was Sunday morning and Cody Vaughn is a human being who sleeps. I emailed too. I put the word urgent in the subject line, which I have never done in my life. Then I sat there and did the arithmetic on who was on that list. 60 households, my mother's church people, 2 of her board members, Wes's whole side, including the ones under 20. And I told myself that nobody watches 4 hours of raw footage, which is true. Nobody watches 4 hours of raw footage. Teenagers scrub through it looking for something funny, and a card labeled Lobby B-roll with a spike in the audio waveform is the single most findable thing on a delivery page. At 9:40 that night, my phone buzzed with a notification from an account I did not recognize. The account belonged to Owen Danner, who is 16, and who is the nephew of Wes's Aunt Bev, and who had sat at table 7 and eaten 2 pieces of cake. He had clipped the 40 seconds out and posted it with a caption that said something about how his cousin's wife made her own bouquets, and this is what she got for it. He tagged nobody. He thought he was defending me. When I opened it, it had 41 views, and I remember thinking that 41 is nothing. 41 is a fluke. I can fix 41. I called Bev first because he's 16 and you go to the adult. Bev put him on. Owen's voice cracked twice. He said, and I believe him, that he was mad on my behalf all through the reception and hadn't been able to sleep. I did not yell at that kid. I told him what it would do to my mother and I asked him to take it down, and he said, okay, right now, and then his phone died, because he is 16. It came down at 7 the next morning. By then it had 11,000 views on his account, and it did not matter even slightly, because at some point around midnight, 3 different accounts had ripped it and reposted it, and one of them was already ahead of him. That is the part people who have never had this happen do not understand. You are not fighting a video. You are fighting copies. The original was a boy in Fort Wayne who felt bad for his cousin's wife. The copies were accounts with names like Family Drama Daily, and they had cut it, captioned it, put a zoom on my mother's face at the exact word, and set it to a piano loop. One of them had already changed the framing so you could not see me at all. By the time I woke up Monday, the original was gone, and the thing itself was a weather system. I went to work Monday, because I had a 9:30 at the cancer center and because I did not know what else to do with my hands. My assignment that morning was Ruben Salas, who is 71 and deaf, and who I have interpreted for since 2020. Ruben was there for a scan result. His oncologist is a decent man who does a thing a lot of decent doctors do, which is that when the news is bad, he starts using the word encouraging in sentences where it does not belong. My job in that room is not to be kind. My job is to give Ruben exactly what the man said, at the speed he said it, including the parts that make you want to look at the floor. So I did. Ruben asked 2 questions. I gave those over the same way. Afterward, in the hallway, he signed thank you, and then he signed something else, which was that he always knows when a doctor is hedging because I hedge in the same shape. I have thought about that a lot since. Driving back to the office, I said it out loud to nobody, the way you say the thing that keeps you upright. I say what was said. That's it. That's the whole job. Then I walked into the scheduling office and a woman I have known for 6 years turned her monitor around, laughing, and said, "You have to see this. This poor girl." And it was my mother's voice out of a stranger's speaker, and my own back in the frame. 41,000 views. Somebody in the comments had already turned the last part of it into a caption. People were putting on pictures of their own weddings. I said that's my mother. I said it evenly, because I say everything evenly. And I watched a woman I have known for 6 years try to get her face out of the laugh it was already in. She said, "Oh my God, Ingrid." She said she was so sorry. Then she asked me gently if I was going to say something publicly, and that was the first time anybody used that phrase to me, and it would not be the last. My mother called at 8:40 that night. It was the first time she had called me since February. She did not ask if I was all right. She did not ask about the honeymoon we'd pushed to August. Her first words were, "Who sent it out?" Not who posted it. Who sent it out? Like the crime was the distribution. I told her the studio system had released the raw archive to the guest list automatically on Sunday morning, and that the archive was the upgrade she had paid for. There was a pause on the line about 4 seconds long. Then she moved right past it, the way she moves past everything, and told me I needed to fix this. I asked her what fixing it would look like. She said I needed to put something out. A post. A statement. Something that made it clear it had been a stressful morning and that things get said. She told me the community picnic was the 28th, and she had 412 households looking at her. She told me she had run Birchmore Ridge for 11 years, that when she took it over, the retention pond was a swamp, and the entrance sign was down in the weeds, and that people forget what a place looks like when nobody is holding the line. She talked for a while. She never once said the sentence back. She never said I shouldn't have, or I was wrong, or even I lost my temper. In 11 minutes of my mother's voice, the thing that happened in that lobby did not exist. Only the recording of it existed. Before she hung up, she asked me one more question, and it is the question I would put on her headstone if I were a crueler woman. She asked whether the videographer had signed anything about what he could keep. Not whether I was okay, not whether Wes's family had seen it, whether there was paperwork. By Tuesday morning, somebody in Birchmore Ridge had matched a navy suit to a face. 380,000 by Tuesday noon. The comment that did it was one short line, posted by a man in Birchmore Ridge who has a boat he isn't supposed to park in his driveway. That's our HOA president. After that, it stopped being a video about a wedding. It became a video about a woman with a clipboard, which is a genre this country cannot get enough of. I did the things you are supposed to do. I filed a report with the platform asking for removal. It came back the same afternoon, and the language was polite and completely immovable. The footage was recorded in a public accommodation. It depicts an event that occurred. It does not target a protected class. It does not contain private information. And This is the part that closed the door. I was not the person who uploaded it, and I was not the person depicted saying it. I had no standing to ask for anything. The only person on earth with standing was my mother, and my mother was not going to file a complaint that put her name on a form. So I filed 6 more reports against the re-uploads and got 6 more of the same letter. By 4 o'clock, the comments had gone from her voice to her record. Somebody posted a photograph of a violation letter, $75, for a trash tote left at the curb overnight. Somebody else posted one for a mailbox painted the wrong shade of black. Then a woman named Dina Whitlock posted a $400 fine over the stain color on a backyard fence, and under it she wrote one line. Some of us have been saying this for years. She had 200 replies inside an hour. I did not know who Dina Whitlock was yet. I was about to. I need to take you back to 2001, to a church basement in Beaver Creek with a linoleum floor and a folding table of casseroles, because that is where I got hired. I was 9. It was the fall potluck at Trinity Lutheran, and my mother had made 2 pans of scalloped potatoes and had been at the church since 7 that morning setting up chairs. Halfway through, my grandmother came in. June Kessler was 62 and had walked from the bus stop on Dayton Zinnia Road, and she was wearing a good wool coat with a long brown stain down the front of it that she had not seen and nobody had told her about. My mother did not go to her. My mother crouched down next to my chair, put her hand flat on my back, and spoke into my ear in a voice I can still hear. Go tell Mrs. Prine and Mrs. Lauder that Grandma hasn't been well. Say it nice. Say it like you're worried. So I went. I was 9, and I was thorough. I told Mrs. Prine that Grandma was having a hard time since her spell in the spring, and I made my face do the right thing, and Mrs. Prine put her hand on her chest and said, "Oh, honey." I went to 4 more tables without being asked. By the time the coffee was gone, everybody in that basement had a story about my grandmother that let them keep eating. In the car afterward, my mother looked at me in the rearview mirror and said the only compliment she has ever given me. "You're good at this." And then, because she is a woman who explains her tools, she said the rest of it. What they see is what's true, Ingrid. That's the whole world. That was the day I got the job, and I worked it for 25 years without ever once being paid. Tuesday night, Wes made grilled cheese at 11 o'clock and put a plate in front of me and did not say anything for a while. Our duplex on Warren Street has a kitchen you can touch both walls in. Then he asked the question that took the floor out. He said, "What do you actually want out of this?" I started to answer with logistics. Get the re-uploads down, get ahead of it, get my mother through the picnic. He let me finish, and then he said, "No. Not what are you doing? What do you want?" And I sat there with a grilled cheese going cold, and I told him the truth for the first time out loud, and it came out of me sounding about 6 years old. I want her to say my name in front of people. That's it. That's the whole thing. Not an apology. Not the money back. I want to stand in a room where somebody she cares about impressing can hear her, and I want her to say, "This is my daughter, Ingrid," and then I want to go home. Wes did not fix it. That is his entire genius as a husband. He did not tell me she loves me in her own way, and he did not tell me to go no contact, and he did not tell me she'd come around. He said, "Okay." Then he ate half my sandwich, because it was going to waste. I'm going to stop here for 1 second, because I know some of you are already typing. Somebody in your family made you the translator too. You know exactly which sentence you have been softening for 20 years. Put it in the comments. Just the sentence. Nothing around it. And subscribe, because the part where I stopped softening is coming, and I still don't know if I did it right. By Wednesday afternoon, it was at 1.6 million, and my mother's sentence had become a format. I heard it in a coffee line on Brown Street. A girl in scrubs held up her friend's iced drink and said it in a nasal voice. "You're a cheap little embarrassment." And the 2 of them fell apart laughing, and neither of them had any idea what they were quoting, or that the woman in the video had a daughter standing 4 feet behind them holding a punch card. I paid and I left, and I got to my car before it caught up with me, and then it did, briefly, in a parking spot at a coffee shop, which is a stupid place for it. Then my brother called. Trent is 38. He runs a landscaping company with 6 trucks, and the largest single line on his books is the Common Grounds contract for Birchmore Ridge, $46,000 a year, mowing, mulch, the retention pond, the entrance beds. That contract gets renewed by a vote of the board every August. He did not open with "Are you okay?" either, but at least he got there second. He asked me if I was all right, and then he asked me to put out a statement. He had it half written in his head. Something short. Something about how it was a hard morning and families say things and the internet does what it does. He said mom's a lot, but this is going to bury her. He said it twice. And I sat in that parking spot and understood something that had honestly never occurred to me in 34 years. The first person in my family to ask me to lie about that lobby was not my mother. She hadn't gotten around to it yet. It was my brother, and he was polite about it. So I tried. I want to be honest that I tried, because I think people imagine I stood on principle the whole week like a statue, and I didn't. I sat down Wednesday night at our kitchen table with a legal pad, and I tried 4 times to write something I could post. The first one started with the phrase taken out of context, and I got as far as the comma before I stopped, because there wasn't any other context. That was the context. The full clip is the context. There is no version of those 40 seconds where the sentence gets better if you back up. The second one said, "My mother is not that person." I looked at that line for a long time. She is that person. She is also the woman who sat with a lonely aunt for 20 minutes at my reception, and who has watered a neighbor's tomatoes every July since 2011. Both of those are her. But the sentence "my mother is not that person" is a load-bearing lie, and I know exactly what it holds up. The third draft I wrote without any verbs I'd have to stand behind. It was mush. Deniable, smooth, professionally worthless. And the fourth one came out in one line, and it was the only true thing on the pad. My mother said what she said. I looked at that for maybe 10 minutes. It is accurate, complete, and it saves absolutely nobody, which is the problem with accurate and complete. And I want to name the thing I was actually doing at that table, because it took me until Friday to see it. I was not protecting my mother. I was trying to buy the porch conversation before she ever came to the porch. I was trying to earn the sentence. Somewhere around draft 3, I caught myself wondering whether, if I got the wording good enough, she might mention me by name when she thanked people at the picnic. 34 years old, married 4 days, sitting at my own kitchen table, working out the exchange rate. Around midnight I got up, took my keys off the hook, and went out to the driveway to open the trunk of my car. Because I had remembered what was still in it. 3 of the grocery store bouquets were still back there from Saturday, jammed against the spare tire, 4 days dead and smelling like a vase nobody emptied. I brought them into the kitchen at midnight and stood at the sink pulling the slime off the stems with my thumbnail. The stalk was gone. The pompons had gone the color of old paper, but the eucalyptus was fine, and dried eucalyptus is better than fresh eucalyptus, which nobody tells you. So I made 3 small bunches out of what was left. I went and got my grandmother's spool out of the drawer, the pale green ribbon, and I tied each one with the length of it. Then I got the hammer and put 2 finished nails into the top of the kitchen doorframe, and I hung them upside down to dry, the way June used to hang oregano over her stove in a trailer she got put out of when my mother was 14. Wes came out in his shorts at 1 in the morning and looked at the doorframe, and then at me, and said, "Those staying?" I said yes. He said good and went back to bed. Then I picked up the legal pad and tore off all 4 drafts, and I put them in the trash under the coffee grounds. Which is not symbolic. It's just where the trash was. That was the decision, and I want to be clear that I made it standing up in my kitchen at 1 in the morning and not in a meeting hall in front of anybody. I was not going to put out a statement. Not for Trent. Not for my mother. Not for the internet. I wasn't being brave about it. There wasn't a true one available, and I don't hand people a false rendering. That's not a value. That's my license. The next morning, the notices went up all over Birchmore Ridge. Thursday, the number was 4.1 million, and there was a laminated sheet zip-tied to the entrance sign of my mother's neighborhood. Special meeting of the members. Friday, 7 p.m. Birchmore Ridge Community Building. Purpose. Consideration of the removal of a director. Here is how that is possible, because I looked it up twice, and then paid somebody to tell me I'd looked it up right. Under the Birchmore Ridge bylaws, members can remove a director with or without cause. Nobody has to prove she broke a rule. Nobody has to prove the rule applies off the property. All it takes is a petition signed by 25% of the membership, 103 households out of 412. And then the board has 10 days to call a special meeting, and then it's a vote. Quorum of 30%. Simple majority of ballots cast. Dina Whitlock filed hers Thursday morning, and she did not gather 103 signatures in 2 days out of nowhere either, which is what my mother told everyone who would listen. Dina had been carrying that petition since March, over a $400 fence stain fine, and she already had about 40 names on it and no path to the rest. The video was not her weapon. The video was her weather. She just walked the same clipboard down the same streets on Tuesday and Wednesday, and this time, nobody said they'd think about it. I found all of this out because my name was on the notice. Third line from the bottom, under invited, I. Holt, daughter of the subject director. Nobody called to ask me first, and that is the part that took the last exit away from me. Up until Thursday morning, I had a perfectly good option, which was to be a person this was happening near instead of a person it was happening to. I could stay in the city. I could let 412 households sort out their own board. But a laminated notice on an entrance sign with my initial on it is an invitation the whole neighborhood has already read. And after that, not showing up is not neutral. Not showing up is a statement, and everybody gets to write it for you. My agency called at 9:02 on Thursday. It was Denise from scheduling, and she is a good person, and she had clearly been told to read something. Effective immediately, I was on administrative leave, unpaid, up to 2 weeks, pending a public profile review. I asked her to explain it in plain words, and she did. And the awful part is that the plain words are correct. An interpreter is supposed to be furniture. You are in the room so that two people can talk to each other, and the second you are a person with a face people recognize, you are in the way. If a patient walks into an exam room to hear about a mass on a scan, and the interpreter is the woman from the wedding video, that room is now partly about me. That is a real harm. I have argued that principle myself in trainings. It's just that nobody ever explains what it feels like to be disqualified from the only place in your life you were ever allowed to be invisible, because of a sentence somebody else said about you. I asked about Ruben. He had chemo on Monday and Wednesday, and he had asked for me by name, because 6 years is 6 years, and because he knows my hands. Denise said the agency had already assigned somebody else, and that the request had been declined at the supervisor level, and I could hear her hating it. I said, okay, thank you, and I hung up before either of us made it worse. Then I sat down on the floor of my hallway with my back against the dry wall. That was the fourth thing that week that got taken. Nobody in my family took it. That was the part that made me finally understand the size of what was happening. Dina Whitlock knocked on my door at 2 in the afternoon. She had found the duplex, which is not hard, and she had brought a coffee cake, which is the Ohio way of serving a subpoena. She is 58, she has a good handshake, and I want to be fair to her, because she is not a villain in this. She really has been fined into a corner by my mother for years, and some of those fines really were personal, and she really did take the fight to the members instead of doing something ugly. She sat at my table and she was warm for a full 7 minutes before she got to it. What she wanted was for me to stand up Friday night and speak, not read anything. Just tell them what she's really like. She said the members deserved the whole picture, and then she said the sentence that ended the conversation, though she didn't know it. She said, "You don't have to worry. We'll protect you." And there it was. There was a side, and it had a roster. And there was a seat on that board opening up in about 30 hours, and Dina Whitlock had been holding a clipboard since March. I told her the only thing I know how to tell anybody. I said, I say what was said. I don't make speeches, and I'm not somebody's witness. She looked at me like I'd spoken Portuguese. She said, "Honey, she called you cheap in front of the whole world." I said yes. She said, "So help us." I said no. She took the coffee cake back, which I respect, honestly, and she was polite about the door. 4 hours later, my mother knocked on the same one. I had not seen my mother stand on any porch of mine in 4 years. She looked smaller on a concrete step than she does behind a folding table. She had a manila folder under her arm and she did not want to come in, so we stood there while a neighbor's sprinkler ran. She said the meeting was a lynch mob. She said Dina Whitlock had wanted her seat since the day she moved in. She said none of these people would have a paved walking path if it weren't for her. All of that is true, and none of it was what she came for. Then she opened the folder and handed me one page, typed, double-spaced, in the font she uses for violation letters. It was a statement, written for me, in my voice. It said the clip did not reflect the woman who raised me. It said we had both been under enormous strain that morning. It said my mother has apologized to me privately, and that I consider the matter closed within our family. It was well written. She had thought about the rhythm of it. And then she gave me the price. And she gave it like a woman closing on a house. She said if I read that at the meeting Friday night, she would come to the dinner Wes and I had postponed, and she would bring the good bowl. And she said she would take me to the club on the first Sunday in July, where she has had a standing table since 2016, and she would walk me around the room herself. Her exact words: "I'll introduce you to everybody. My daughter Ingrid." It is the only thing I have ever wanted from her, and she had it appraised, priced, and on the porch inside of 4 days. I took the page out of her hand. She did not leave. She sat down on the top step instead, in a linen jacket, on a dirty step, which my mother does not do. She looked at the sprinkler across the street for a while and then she started talking, and her voice came out without the coat of paint on it, and I had never heard that before in my life. She told me about Cloverleaf. It was a mobile home park off Route 4, and my grandmother lost the lot rent in the winter of 1977. And in March the sheriff's deputy came and stood at the end of the drive with his hands folded while they carried everything out. My mother was 14. She said the boxes were the worst part, because a box is honest. She said the Bergstrom girls came out on their porch across the road and sat down on the glider to watch, and nobody offered to help, and one of their mothers brought them out lemonade. She said she carried a floor lamp with no shade past those girls 4 times, because they made her go back for the rest of it. Then she said, quietly, "You've never had people watch you get put out." And I almost put my hand on her back. I was that close. I could feel my arm getting ready to do it. Then my mother stood up, brushed off the back of her jacket, and bent down and squared the doormat with the edge of the step, because it was crooked and she could see it was crooked. And she said, "What they see is what's true, Ingrid. It always was. I'm the only one in this family who ever understood that." Then she got in her car. I almost said yes. I want to be honest about that. I spent Thursday night trying to make her page true. That is what I do, so that is what I did. I sat with a pencil and worked it like a transcript, and I want you to see how close I got. Strain, I could keep. It was a wedding morning. Everybody was strained. Privately apologized, I struck, because she had not. And if I read that out loud in a room of her neighbors, I would be manufacturing an apology that never happened and handing it to 400 households as a fact. Does not reflect the woman who raised me. I sat with the longest, and I could not keep it, because that is precisely the woman who raised me, and I am, in the most literal way, the product she built. By 1 in the morning, the page had 4 lines left standing, and none of them were load-bearing. Then Trent called. He'd heard about the porch. He wanted to know what I was going to do. And when I told him, he did the thing our whole family does, the family trade. And he did it without knowing he was doing it. He said, "She called you cheaping. She didn't call you worthless. There's a difference." He was translating. He was standing between me and a sentence, softening it so it would go down, exactly the way I had done for her in a church basement when I was 9. My own brother had the job too. I just got the promotion. I told him I wasn't reading anything and I wasn't speaking against her either. He said then, stay home Friday. He said, and then, don't come to Marley's 16th in October because I'm not going to have you sitting there being the reason nobody talks. Then he hung up. That was the third thing. At 11 that night, my father knocked. Dale Holt is 66. He put in furnaces and air handlers for 31 years, and he has the kind of quiet people mistake for depth. He sat at my kitchen table under the dried eucalyptus and turned a coffee mug around and around without drinking any of it. He said he wasn't going to ask me to do anything. Then he sat there long enough that I started doing dishes, and with my back to him, he finally said it. He said he asked her to stop one time, 1998. I was 6. He said he told her in the car coming home from somewhere that she was hard on me in front of people, and that she did not raise her voice or argue. She simply did not speak to him again until the second week of November. He said it was the longest month of his life, and he never brought it up again. Not one time, not in 28 years. He did not dress it up. He didn't say he was sorry in a way that asked me for anything back. He said, I watched. That's what I did. I watched it happen to you for 34 years, and I got used to it. Then he stood up and put the mug in the sink and stopped in the doorway under my grandmother's ribbon, and he said the only thing he had. You were never the one who was cheap. My father sat in that kitchen for 2 hours and it took him 34 years to say one true thing out loud. If there is somebody in your life still sitting on their one true thing, don't wait for a hotel lobby. Tell me who it is in the comments. And subscribe. Friday night is next, and I still don't know if I got it right. Friday morning, it was 6.8 million, and a woman from a Dayton station left me 2 voicemails before 8. I drove out to Birchmore Ridge anyway. 25 minutes, the same drive I made in the back seat of a station wagon for 18 years. I parked at the far end by the pond and walked the path, because I wanted to look at it once before whatever was going to happen happened. And here is what I am obligated to tell you. It is beautiful out there. The entrance beds were mulched. The retention pond has cattails and a bench, and a little sign about the ducks. The walking path is level, and it is level, because a woman spent 4 years at township meetings about a culvert. There was a picnic banner half hung between 2 poles by the community building, one corner up, one corner in the grass, waiting for whoever was going to finish it on Saturday. And through the window of the building at 8 in the morning, alone, my mother was standing at the podium. She had the microphone off. She had a page in her hand and she was going through it, and I stood far enough back on the grass that she couldn't see me. I watched her mouth it. She stopped, went back, and did the same piece again. And again. I have watched people's mouths for a living for 9 years, and I know what my own name looks like coming out of a face. She was practicing the phrase, my daughter, Ingrid. She got it wrong twice. She said my daughter and then stopped, like the second half was a step in the dark. I sat in my car for 40 minutes after that. Then I drove back into the city and made a phone call. Phil Rooney has been the secretary of that board for 9 years, and he answers his own phone on the second ring like it's 1994. I asked him to put me on the speakers list for the meeting. There was a silence, and then he said, careful as a man diffusing something, Ingrid, honey, are you sure? I said I was. He explained the rules to me anyway, which I appreciated. The list closes at 5. After 5, it's read into the minutes, out loud, in order, and it can't be amended from the floor. Once your name is read, you are called, and if you don't stand up when you're called, that is also on the record. He said it twice, the second time slower. He wanted me to hear the door lock behind me. I said, put me down. Ingrid Holt. He asked if I wanted to be listed as a member, and I said no. List me however the notice already has me. Then I hung up and stood in my kitchen with my hand still on the phone, because I had just done something I have never done in my life. Every useful thing I have ever done, I did from offstage. I stand next to people. I make other people's words work. I have spent 34 years being the reason a room went smoothly, and not one person in that room ever left remembering that I was in it. Now my name was going to be read out loud off a list in front of my mother's neighbors, and there was no version of the evening where I got to sit down and stay quiet. Wes came home at 5:30. He looked at my face and asked what I was going to say. I said, "What was said?" He didn't ask which part. "I got dressed at 6. Not the Navy. I own a Navy suit and I could not do it. And I want credit for noticing that impulse and refusing it. I wore gray, flat shoes. No jewelry except my ring, which was 6 days old. On the way out, I stopped under the kitchen doorframe and pulled one stem of dried eucalyptus out of the middle bunch, and it came loose with a small dry sound, and I put it in my jacket pocket. I don't have a good reason. It cost about $1, and it had already outlasted everything else about that Saturday. The drive was 25 minutes, and I did it without the radio. The lot at the community building was full by 6:40, and cars were parked down both sides of Birchmore Court and up onto the grass, which is a violation, and I noticed that, and I understood in that second that I have my mother's eyes in my head permanently. Inside there were 96 folding chairs and people standing 3 deep along the back wall. Somebody had brought the good coffee urn out. Phones were up all over the room, held at chest height, a little fence of them. Dina Whitlock sat front row left with a folder. My mother sat at the head table with her hands folded on the plastic tablecloth and a wooden nameplate in front of her that said L. Holt, President. Somebody had already taken a picture of the nameplate. My mother looked at the door when I came in, and then she looked away, and she did not look at me again for 40 minutes. My father was not there. I found out later he sat in the truck in the lot the entire time with the windows down, which is either the saddest thing in this story or the second saddest. Phil Rooney read the speakers list into the minutes at 7 o'clock sharp, in order, the way he said he would. I was third. Phil opened by reading the bylaw out loud in a flat voice, because Phil is the kind of man who believes procedure is a form of kindness, and he is right. Removal of a director, with or without cause, by majority of ballots cast, quorum 30%. He announced the count at the door. 137 households present or by proxy, out of 412. Quorum met. Somebody in the back said, well. The first speaker was a woman named Ruth Ann Beckert, who is about 70 and who had brought a folder of her own. She read out violation letters by date. Trash tote, 75. Basketball hoop visible from the street, 75. Mailbox, wrong black, 50, and then 100 when she painted it the wrong black twice. Her hands shook the whole time, and it wasn't fear. It was 7 years of being made to feel like a slob on her own property, and when she sat down, the room made a noise. The second speaker was a man named Curtis Wan, who stood up and said that when his wife died in 2019, Loretta Holt organized the meal train, ran it for 11 weeks, and personally mowed his yard in August because he couldn't get out of bed. He said, "That's also her. You people are going to sit here and pretend that isn't also her." And he was right. And the room did not like being right about that, and it went quiet in a different way. My mother did not move during either one. She sat with her hands folded on the plastic tablecloth like a woman waiting on a bus. That is her great skill, and it is a real one. She has sat through worse rooms than that with the same face, and every person who has ever underestimated her has done it in the 20 seconds before she opens her mouth. Then Phil looked at his list and he took his time, and he said, Ingrid Holt. I stood up, and I heard about 40 phones turn toward the aisle at once, which sounds like fabric. The microphone was on a plastic stand in the center aisle, and it thumped when I touched it. I could hear the window unit running in the back. I said good evening, and I said my name, and I said I was not a member and had not lived in Birchmore Ridge since 2010. Then I took my mother's page out of my jacket pocket and unfolded it, and I read it, all of it, straight through, in the voice I use in a hospital room, which is level and unhurried and adds nothing. The clip circulating online does not reflect the woman who raised me. My mother and I were both under enormous strain on the morning of my wedding, as any family would be. She has apologized to me privately. I consider the matter closed within our family, and I would ask my mother's neighbors to consider it closed as well. I read the last line and I let the paper come down to my side. I want to tell you what that room did, because I have thought about it every day since. Dina Whitlock's face went the color of paper. In the front row, somebody said, out loud, "Oh, come on." Two people stood up to leave. And at the head table, my mother let out a breath she had been holding for 4 days, and her shoulders came down an inch. And for the first time all night, she looked at me. And she looked at me, the way she looked at me, in the car outside that church in 2001. Like I was good at this. I folded the page in half, and I folded it again, and I set it on the little shelf of the microphone stand. Then I said, "That's what I was asked to say tonight. My mother typed it Thursday and brought it to my house. Now here's what happened. I gave it to them the way I would give it to a judge, or to Ruben, or to anybody who has a right to the whole thing and not a version of it." 9:14 in the morning, Saturday, June 6th, the lobby of the Arbor Hotel on 5th Street. I said I was standing by the north planter holding 2 plastic buckets of flowers I had bought that morning at the Kroger on Wayne Avenue for $61, because I had canceled a florist in April to keep the wedding inside what my husband and I could pay for. I said my mother came out of the east elevator and crossed to me and stopped about a foot away. I said the videographer was 20 steps behind her, filming the atrium, under a contract for lobby coverage beginning at 8:30. I gave them what she said, in order, without adding anything and without leaving anything out. That she had people flying in, that she had people from the board coming, that she had spent 11 years making sure nobody in this town could say a thing about her family, and then, in the same flat voice I had used for the page, because the job does not permit me to change my delivery for the ugly parts. "You're a cheap little embarrassment." Nobody in that room moved. They had all seen the clip. There was nothing left to reveal. And that is the whole point. 4 million people had already watched it. What they had never heard was somebody say it without any music under it. Then I said the 2 sentences I had come there to say. "I'm not asking you to remove her." I waited. "And I'm not asking you to keep her." Dina Whitlock's folder slid off her lap. I said, "This is your association and your vote, and it has nothing to do with me, and I'm not going to be anybody's evidence tonight. I say what was said. That is the entire job. It is the only thing I have ever been good at, and I want to be clear with all of you about where I learned it. I learned it in her house, when I was 9 years old, and she is the one who taught me." And then I said the last part. "I have spent 34 years telling people what my mother meant. I'm done doing that. From tonight, she can speak for herself." Then I turned to the head table because the rest of it was hers and not theirs, and I said it in front of every one of them anyway, which is the only reason it cost anything. I said, "Mom, the dinner is off. Don't bring the bowl." I said, "And I'm not coming to the club in July, so you can let the table go." I said, "You don't have to say my name anymore. I'm taking the price off it." My mother stood up. In 34 years, I had never once heard my mother raise her voice anywhere but inside a house, and she raised it in a room with 137 households in it. She said I had no idea what she had built. She said I had never had one thing come at me that she hadn't stood in front of first. And then she said it, loud, with her hand flat on the plastic tablecloth. "What they see is what's true." And the room heard it. That is the whole thing. She said the sentence she has organized her entire life around, out loud, in front of everybody, and it landed in that low-ceilinged room like a plate dropping, and I watched about 100 people understand my mother all at once. I did not say anything back. I want to be honest that a part of me had a sentence ready, and I did not use it, because using it would have made me a person who came there to win. I said thank you into the microphone, and I sat down in a folding chair in the 3rd row. Some people clapped. Not many. And I sat there with my hands in my lap and understood that the clapping was the same appetite that made a girl in a coffee line do the voice, and that I was now standing in it, and that nothing about it made me feel 1 degree better. I left before the ballots. I want that in the record too. Phil called for the vote at 8:20, and I stood up and walked out the side door past the coffee urn, and I sat on the trunk of my car in the parking lot with my jacket on my knees and 1 dried eucalyptus stem in the pocket. It was still light out. Somebody's sprinkler was going 2 streets over. I could hear the window unit through the wall and then a lot of chairs moving at once. Phil Rooney came out at 10 after 9 and stood there with his reading glasses pushed up on his head and told me straight, because he is a decent man, and he knew I wasn't going to go back in and ask. 137 ballots cast, 118 for removal, 19 against. He said, "It's done, Ingrid." And then he said, "I'm sorry about all of it." And he went back inside to write it into the minutes. I sat there a while longer. It did not feel like anything I would call winning. There was no lift in it. Whatever the internet did to my mother that week, it did on its own. And whatever those neighbors did to her that night, they did on their own. And the only thing in the entire 6 days that was actually mine was 3 minutes at a microphone where I gave away the one thing I had ever wanted. Then I called Cody Vaughn from the parking lot. I asked him to delete the raw archive off the studio server permanently, the whole card, not just the lobby. He said it was already gone, he'd pulled it Monday. I asked him to confirm it in writing anyway. He did, at 9:26. I have never watched that clip all the way through. I'm not going to. It is September now, so here is where everybody landed. Birchmore Ridge elected Karen Fenner president at the July meeting. She is 66, she is pleasant, and in her first month she mailed out 11 violation letters, in the same font, over garbage totes and one basketball hoop. Dina Whitlock got the open seat she wanted and has already lost 2 votes to Karen. The picnic went off on the 28th, and I hear the turnout was the best in years. The path is still level. The ducks still have their sign. Nothing about that neighborhood is different except the name on the little wooden block. And I think that is worth saying out loud because I know some of you were hoping for something bigger, and there isn't anything bigger. My mother stopped coming to meetings. In August, she sold the house on Birchmore Court in 11 days and moved to a condo in Springfield with a view of a parking lot and no association board to sit on. She has not called me. I don't expect it now, and the not expecting is newer and quieter than I thought it would be. Trent kept the contract because the new board needed a landscaper who already knew where the water shutoffs were. He has not spoken to me since June. My agency put me back on the schedule after 11 days, and Ruben Salas asked for me the same week and told me, with his hands, that the substitute was very fast and very polite, and told him nothing. I have been in an exam room almost every day since, being furniture, and I have never been so glad to be furniture in my life. The re-uploads are still up. All of them. Nobody can get those down, not me, not her, not 118 votes. We had the postponed dinner 2 weeks ago. 12 people in a duplex built for 4, folding chairs from Wes's shop, a card table on the end with a bedsheet over it. Bev came. Owen came, and would not look at me for the first hour, and then ate more than anybody. Nobody took a picture of the food. My grandmother's ribbon is still on the doorframe, holding 3 bunches of dead eucalyptus that have gone the color of a paper bag, and Wes's aunt asked me what they were, and I told her they were the wedding flowers, and she said, "Well, they lasted." Then last Sunday my phone rang and it was Marley. She is 15, and she is not supposed to be talking to me. She had posted something about her grandmother back in June, when everybody was posting, and now Loretta had found it, and Marley wanted to know how to apologize in a way that would make it stop. She wanted me to write it for her. She said, "You're good at this." She said the exact words, and she has no idea where they came from, and I had to sit down on the arm of the couch. I did not write it for her. I gave her the only thing anybody in our family has ever needed and nobody ever got. I said, "Tell her what happened. Tell her you posted it and why. Don't tell her what she meant." Marley was quiet for a second and then said, "That was it. That was all of it." And I said, "Yes. That is all of it. It is the shortest thing I know, and it took me 25 years and a folding chair in a community building to learn it, and I handed it to a 15-year-old over the phone on a Sunday in a kitchen with dead flowers hanging in the doorway, for free. I spent most of my life believing that softening what people said was the same thing as being kind to them, and it took a hotel lobby, a video I never posted, and 118 strangers voting on my mother to teach me that it was never kindness at all. It was just a job I was hired for when I was 9, that nobody was ever going to pay me for, and that I was allowed to quit. That's my story. 40 seconds in a hotel lobby, 6 days, 1 vote I didn't cast. If you are the person in your family who translates one relative to everybody else, and you've been doing it so long you can't hear your own voice anymore, consider this your notice. You're allowed to put that job down. Tell me in the comments who taught you to do it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.